As you know, Directors UK is both a collecting society and it's a director membership organisation. What I wanted to very briefly tell you about is that it's very much driven by directors. It was formed because we, as directors, wanted it. Not quite that simple, but in essence, it was us. It was a group of directors who drove the change. And I wanted to focus this presentation on what we as directors can do with our collecting societies and what we as directors can do if we put our minds to it. So a very brief history. Directors UK was formed in 2007. It was originally the DPRS, which was a collecting society, and I think you all, or most of you, know about it. It was a successful and well-run collecting society. It had successfully negotiated a deal with the UK broadcasters in 2007 to get remuneration for secondary uses of our works. So it was a good, strong organisation. But we had a union and we had a guild who in theory represented directors, but actually, do you know what? They're rubbish. They're weak, ineffectual, and we had no voice for directors protecting our cause, protecting our rights, nothing. It was so bad. So directors were very much disillusioned, disempowered, and we had no voice. We felt very disenfranchised. So it was a group of famous directors, it has to be said, who got together and got themselves onto the DPRS board so that there were a lot of directors who wanted change, and they voted for change, which is how Directors UK came about. That's it in a little nutshell. So, so why combine a collecting organisation and a membership organisation? Okay, let's start off.
Well, the obvious answer to that question is that most collecting societies are very rich and most guilds and unions are very poor. And financial strength provides you with the resources to do all sorts of other things. Directors UK's collections, as you can see from the numbers up there, 16.5 million euros. Now, obviously, a collecting society can't use your royalties to do other things. It is there to distribute the royalties to you, the members. But a substantial source of revenue comes from the management fees that the collecting societies earn, and some of that money can be used to benefit members in other ways. So we think there's some financial muscle around linking yourself up with the collecting society.
Okay, we keep swapping like this, it's quite good. Okay, so, and again, I'm going to kind of stress that you need to understand that unions in the UK, as a general rule, have very little power. We can't even negotiate on behalf of freelance workers, like I think that situation is in a lot of countries in the EU. So the big thing is that creative people, we may be admired, and sometimes we're respected, but we're not really taken seriously because we do the creative bits and the producers and broadcasters do the business bits, okay? But as rights holders, as copyright owners, we have a lot more power because without access to copyright, the business bit can't be done. So let's face it, in the last 10, 15, 20 years, what is generally respected and has been respected for a long time is money and it's business. So it makes total sense for us as directors to align our creativity with good business. That way, people will take us seriously and listen to us. But that said, as Andrew said, it's great that we have financial muscle, and we do, but it is our members' money, and we always have to remember that. Right. Lobbying and campaigning. It's something we as directors feel very, very strongly about. We want to protect our rights. We want to lobby for better working conditions, for better pay, because all those things have got quite poor in the UK. It's taken us a while to be heard, and really heard, both inside the industry and outside the industry, both locally and international. We've done a lot of work over the last 8 years, 7, 8 years. And when I say we've done a lot of work at the last 7, 8 years, it's very much we as directors at the heart of it. It's not just our organisation. We take an active role. We always take a director to meetings, whether it be in the Parliament, whether in the European Parliament. there's always a creative director present in the room. And the thing that's really struck me, and is a bit scary, to be honest, is how many of those big business people, whether they're parliamentary politicians, and sometimes even in broadcasters, who've never really met a director, and they don't know what we do, let alone understand freelance market. So it's a very powerful thing when you start to engage your members and bring them along with you. It's also a really good thing to combine both, because it gives a single voice for directors, and that is so much more powerful having three separate voices, which is a position we were in, only one of which kind of had any clout, really. So it's a very powerful position for us in the UK, for where we're at. We only have directors in the organisation, although that does, bless them, represent dead directors too. Can I have that? But we don't have first ADs, we don't have producers, we don't have corporate members, we don't have agents. It's just directors. So what we're finding now, I'm really, really happy to say this to you, is that our voice is being heard. We're finding that we are consulted on creative matters and policy, and people are coming to us to ask for our opinion. And this is a massive change over the last few years. At the beginning, it was much harder to be heard. Now we're not. We're being sought. Not only that, we're now creating alliances and affiliances. So I'm very happy to announce to you that in alliance with Directors UK is a new organisation called Stage Directors UK. It has already almost 1,000 members, still very much at its beginning, and the membership is rolled out officially in April, I think. So it's a model that people are hoping to emulate, and they want to kind of join us because they see that we're a voice that's being heard and respected, finally. Okay. That's you.
The UK is a country that finds it quite difficult to talk about culture, probably more difficult than most other countries in Europe. But the way we see it as expressing our voice in policy making is both economic and cultural. So we're making an argument that the government must pay attention to creative industries for economic reasons, because they're proving to be one of the fastest growing industries in the economy. But they must understand that a lot of the creation of the intellectual property that sustains that industry is being generated by creative individuals. And those individuals need a powerful voice to counter the voices of the businesses, which is what they usually hear. But it's not just an economic argument as well, because we are finding that it is quite difficult to get a cultural message across to our government. There are very few groups prepared to speak up for the value of culture and creativity. So we see that very much as part of our mission to do both those things. In terms of the sort of two biggest strategic priorities for us in our lobbying and campaigning, we've put them on that slide here. The first is pay and working conditions for directors. I'm sure we're not alone in experiencing a downward trend in the pay of directors in real terms. And we're also experiencing many problems in the working conditions that directors experience. And we're starting to understand how, because there are so many directors who work as freelancers in creative industries, some of the problems we experience are also common to other industries like healthcare and IT and construction. So we're interested in forming alliances with other industries that also want to protect and support freelancers. And of course, as we're probably going to hear this afternoon, there's a specific part of the work stream in the copyright review that is going to look at remuneration of authors and performers. So that's a key part of our work plan for this year. And the last bullet on that slide is about improving the status of directors, both individually and as a profession, and protecting directors' creative rights. Delith mentioned the fact that we often come across people who really do not have any idea what directors do, and we feel that we have to do something more positive to counteract that. So this year we're going to be working on a number of projects which are trying to explain a director's role and how they work to a more public audience as well as an industry audience, and to try and get that message to become more clear. But we also have a concern that the creative rights of directors are under threat. We often hear about directors being excluded from the cutting room, so they can't post-produce their own work. We hear about directors who have much reduced preparation time, and all of that we feel is reducing the quality of the final programs and the films and diminishing the experience of the directors. So these are our most important priorities for our lobbying and campaigning activity.
Okay, so one use that, start again. Data. Okay. Data is so cool. Data is king, or in my case, queen. It's amazing. When you are affiliated with, when you are one association of both directors and a collecting society, you get access to your own data. It's amazing. You get everything on it: names, works, regions, gender, age, genre, frequency of work, frequency of how many times directors are working. There is so much data to be mined. It's a bit of a secret weapon, actually. What we can do is use data to create evidence and support analysis. Now, I think those of you who are in Malmo heard me give a presentation about how we use data in our campaign to improve opportunities for women directors in television. It's a really interesting thing, because the preconception of a creative is that we're a bit fluffy, or a bit arty, or a bit rubbish at business. So when we went to the broadcasters and we said, do you know what is happening in the industry? Do you know what the industry trends are? They were going, you could feel them being very patronising for about 15 to 20 minutes. There, love, yes, now go away. And then we were able to go, so, here you go, here's the hard data, here is evidence. And I tell you, they went white. They were so deeply, deeply shocked. Now, the trick is how we get them to improve it. But nonetheless, when you can back up your arguments with solid, hard data, it makes it infinitely more powerful.
Yes, as well as a database that tells you about the members, what collecting societies also get are reports of the uses of works. And in our case, these reports are incredibly detailed. They go down to the level of an individual sale and revenue attached to an individual episode of a program or a film. So when you have that kind of level of data, you can produce some incredibly useful analysis of how much revenue is being made by particular works or particular kinds of works or by a particular director. And we're using that information at the moment in a current negotiation we're having with the broadcasters on our main UK rights agreement, and it's proving to be incredibly powerful. I think if we didn't have that, I think we would be in a very difficult position. So data is incredibly powerful, and the connection between Directors Association and the Collecting Society is how we've managed to create that level of access.
And it's just a very short point in terms of, as a director, before, all you can really talk about is fairness. You talk about it's not fair that you don't pay us enough. But it's very, very different when you can put data together and go, do you know what, this is not a question about fair. This is what we are worth in business terms, in monetary terms to you. And it's a language that universally the broadcasters understand. So you're suddenly learning to speak their language. It's been quite a difficult journey for us, I think, as directors. But it really changes. It just changes things so much. I mean, we've got all this data. We've just started, so there's all sorts of other things we're hoping to do with it. We're hoping to, we have started a campaign on diversity, so we'll be looking at ethnicity. All that comes out soon. We've got in May we're publishing a new round of women director figures. So we'll see we'll see if there's been any improvements. We think a little bit, not as much as we'd like, but it's still very soon. So we're at the very beginning of mining this data. It's a very exciting thing. Okay, and this is you, I think.
I'll just briefly talk about the kind of things that the member association does as opposed to the collecting society, and I'm sure many of you will recognise these things. So we do campaigning and lobbying, we do industrial relations and commercial negotiations. One of the most important things we do is provide advice and help for our members, and particularly legal advice. So we have an in-house legal counsel who gives advice direct to individual members, and her caseload, I'm afraid, is a large one because there are many things that need correcting. But the ability to have a personalised legal advice service is very important to us. We have a very good programme of events and screenings, particularly at this time of year as it's awards season. So we've got some very good programme of films and question and answer sessions with the directors. We're doing a lot of work to build up our community of directors, and particularly using social media to do that. We've started to, we now have about, I think it's 8,000 Twitter followers, so we're using that community to get our messages out more directly. We've started to work on our own training and career development programs. In the UK, training is really only done by the BBC. Other than the BBC, training is very difficult, and particularly difficult for freelancers to access. So we're taking a more active role in establishing training programs. And I've put a couple of references at the bottom to two of our web services. I think it might be a bit, I'm going to not do it now just in case it doesn't quite work, but Employer Advisor, those of you who were at our festival might remember that I spoke a bit about this. This is our version of TripAdvisor. So instead of having a file about a hotel or a restaurant, we have a page about a production company, and members can go and post a review about their experience of that production company and give it a rating. Would you like to see it? Shall I risk it?
It's great for us.
This may not. Let's see if this works. Oh yeah, it has worked. There we go. Okay, so this has got, as you can see, it looks a bit like the front end of TripAdvisor. So you can search a company, you could type in any company there, but this is showing one called Lucky Day Productions. Let's click on them at the moment. So it opens a window there, and you can see someone has posted a review on it. Let's see if it expands a bit. There we go. Lovely, lovely people. This is someone who had a nice experience working for Lucky Day Productions, although I cannot speak for the company going forward, as the people I am referring to have now moved on, including the very wonderful MD. I wonder if he posted this review. Really collaborative and supportive, a little tight on the pay front, and no involvement in the edit. So this is a director able to say some quite detailed things about exactly what was going on in that company, and they've given them a rating. We created these categories because we picked three that we thought would be most helpful. So contract and compliance is about, what kind of contract did you get, and did the company honour the terms of it? Was it a stimulating and helpful creative environment, and what were your working conditions like? So you get the idea, yeah, that it's like TripAdvisor but for companies. It's not been up for long, and we want to sort of encourage members to post reviews on it. The more reviews we get, just like TripAdvisor, I think the more useful and authoritative it will be. But I think the members who've used it really like it, and you can post anonymously, as you see there. So people are more willing to express themselves on this. So let's go on to the next one. Oh yeah, find a director. That's our database of members, but we've made that more sophisticated now. So you can put your show reel on it, you can put your CV, and it's intended to be a resource that employers can search. So it's in the public part of our website, and there are some search filters such as where you live, what kind of genre you're working in, or if you have any special qualifications such as being able to work in a hostile environment or something like that. So it's trying to be a really useful tool for employers as well. Right, where's me? There we go. Look, it's a very sensitive mouse, this. Okay, that's you, Tara.
Just like directors, sensitive petal. Right. What do we want as directors from our collecting societies? We want to be paid. Let's face it, it's about surviving in those times when you're not earning any money. It's about being rewarded for the success of your work. So our governance, it's incredibly important that we are transparent and accountable, and that we have a good working practice. It's really important to us as directors to know that our society does all these things. So everything is on our website for our members. You can look at our accounts, you can look at our rules for distribution, you can look at pretty much everything. Who we are as a board, who the staff are, it's all up there. We try to be as open and as accountable as possible. We have one board of directors, and we are all working directors. That's very, very important. We're elected from the membership. We have 12 board members plus 4 committee chairs. That's for factual entertainment, drama, TV fiction, and film. So every area is represented. Now, the tricky thing about being elected by your membership is there is a tendency for the famous people to get directed onto a board because everybody recognises their names. Now, that's great, but it doesn't mean you necessarily have a fair representation of all your membership. And part of our drive for good governance and for transparency is to ensure that all our members are represented. So we have on our board an option to co-opt, that is to bring people in. So currently we have somebody from the games industry, from advertising, but she's also an animator, and we also have somebody from entertainment and the multi-camera area. So we make sure that we are covered, that all our members are represented. It's very, very important. We're also introducing regional representations because, as you know, Scotland is still in the UK, right? So we're going to make sure that we have somebody from Scotland, from Wales, from north of England, so that we are truly representative. So we're constantly evolving as the marketplace changes. We're constantly evolving, trying to keep on top of it all, really, so that we recognise, basically keep on top of it all. Right. So it's all about the money, isn't it, in the end? It really is. We have to be transparent about the way we distribute our money. And the key component in this is our distribution committee. Again, the committee is formed of all directors. It's chaired by me, and that chair is appointed by the board. It's not an elected position, it's appointed by the board. Again, we work very, very hard to ensure that that committee represents all areas of our membership. So it's quite a big committee, and it's a very committed one as well. I'm very happy to report. We have, we have dead people, have dead directors, represented, that is, not in ghostly fashion. And we also have an independent member. Because it's about money, it's really useful to have an independent voice on our committee. Directors, we're not experts in rights. We know what our rights are, but we're not experts. So it's very important to be open to new ideas, new viewpoints. So that's why we have an independent member on our committee. Right. Rules. We regularly review our rules to make sure that we keep up with industry practice. It's incredibly important because I don't know about everywhere else, but our TV landscape is changing so quickly, it's very hard to keep on top of it. We put everything up on the website so you can see very clearly how money is distributed. And one of the things we do is to conduct a regular review of our rules. We conducted a major review over the last year and a half, which threw up quite an interesting problem. Okay, we're directors, we talked a lot about it, but we have finally resolved it. It's an interesting thing, but I don't know about the rest of you. We're finding in the UK that there are more and more programmes with multiple director names on it. So lots and lots of different director credits. So it's very difficult sometimes to determine who the principal director is, therefore who has copyright, therefore who should be paid. Now, as directors, we talked a lot about it, and we did talk about it, but what do you do to resolve it? So because we're directors, in the end, we decided it's something we have to take back. we have to take ownership of our own profession. It sounds very fundamental, but when you've got all these really big broadcasters and big business people dictating how your industry is going, it's quite difficult. So our starting point was to look at who and what a director is. It sounds really fundamental, but in the UK, we have no legal definition of what a principal director is. So we, as a distribution committee, came up with this particular definition, which I'll read for you, if I may, with my specs. So the role of principal director on an individual film or television work consists of the following components: interpreting and planning the realization of creative content, style and structure of a work, capturing and gathering the creative content through directing the production, crew, performers, presenters and contributors in a work, and directing the editing of the creative content to form it into a cohesive whole. It sounds really fundamental, but when you're getting multiple director credits, you're then naturally going to get disputes. And if you don't have a clear definition of what a director is, it's very hard to resolve those disputes. So that's us in a nutshell about how we as directors drive the heart of it. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of commitment, but it's worth it.
Just on that final point on this slide, the distribution committee, we have also looks after standards of quality of service that we give to directors and the efficiency. And I suppose one of the key things there is making sure that we don't hold on to royalties too long before they're distributed to members. Now in the UK, we rather anticipated some of the provisions in the directive, and all the collecting societies in the UK have created codes of conduct. They've done it on a voluntary basis, but these are very detailed descriptions of how you will operate, and they're particularly detailed about the standard of service that a director can expect, and that includes a complaints procedure if you feel that the service has not been good, and that goes all the way up to an ombudsman who can provide a kind of final adjudication if somebody has a very serious complaint. But obviously we're going to talk a little bit about that this afternoon, because a lot of these provisions have will then be in the directive. Right, let's have a word about undistributable funds. Directors UK has what I call an open membership, which is that although we obviously have people who can call themselves members, we often find that we've collected money for someone who is not a member at that time. So although we're operating strictly an extended collective licensing scheme, we do feel under a great obligation to make a diligent search for a director where we've got some money for them, but they're not yet one of our members. And we hold on to money that we collect in the UK for a period of 2 years while we try and locate the recipient. It is always surprising how difficult it can be to connect up someone with their money. The typical example is if you send them an email saying, we've got £2,000 for you, it's often dismissed as a scam email. So we have to rely much more on word of mouth and perhaps using an intermediary who is already a member to make sure that people understand that it's not a fake thing and we really are who we say we are. But of course in the directive there are some quite specific rules that are going to require all collecting societies to recycle undistributed funds, and I guess Cecile, you may touch on this a bit this afternoon. So we are having to think in Directors UK about how we're going to do that, and we're looking at setting up our own charitable trust. We don't have a charity connected to our organisation at the moment, but we think that might be very useful for us, because some of the things that we might be using to spend our undistributed funds could be things like helping directors who are in hardship, or educational uses, or things like that that are slightly outside the scope of our organisation at the moment. And I suppose also in there is something to do with raising the level of the public's awareness of what directors do. As I said earlier, we're quite worried that the public doesn't really seem to get exactly what directors do. So that's another area of activity that we're looking at. I have got a slide about private copying, surprise, surprise, but it's only one. As most of you probably know, before 2014, the UK did not have a private copying exception in our law. So technically, acts of private copying have been illegal in the UK. But it was, private copying is done widely in practically every household in the UK. So we had a very anomalous situation of an act that was technically illegal being carried out by almost all the citizens of the UK. Now, the government in the UK confronted this issue, but what we've ended up with, I'm afraid, is the worst of all worlds, because there is now a private copying exception in the UK. It is quite limited, so I don't think it's going to allow consumers to do as much legally as they think they might be able to do. But the crucial thing for us is the UK has not included any compensation to authors. So we are in a situation where harm is being done to us through the use of the exception, but with no ability to get compensation. Now, as soon as that law was passed, a number of societies got together, and the driver of this was an umbrella group called UK Music, which is representing a number of interests in the music industry. And they have mounted a judicial review challenge to the government. And the grounds they're mounting on are that the UK has introduced this exception without compensation, so it's therefore in contravention of the European directive. So that's the reason, that's the sort of basic reason why this challenge is being mounted. We're supporting it, so are ALCS, which is the society that represents writers, and BEX, which is the society that represents artists. So we will see how that plays out. Our government is ideologically very opposed to levies. Then. More. On we go. Our most important deal is the television rights agreement. So I'll tell you a bit about this. It is a form of extended collective license. The way it works is broadcasters pay an annual fee to Directors UK, and individual directors agree that they will sign contracts which contain a clause assigning their copyright to producers. This has a number of advantages. It's very simple to administer because one deal covers all the main broadcasters and producers in the UK. There are no enforcement costs and very low collection costs, and its one deal provides a large bundle of rights effectively to production companies. For us, it's guaranteed income. We get that money in advance every year. And for producers, because they are able to take full assignments of copyrights, it provides them with a very flexible bundle of rights. The biggest advantage for us, though, is that if this agreement ever is terminated, then the copyright for future productions of all our member directors is automatically assigned back to Directors UK. And that's an absolutely crucial provision for us, because the most vulnerable situation will be, as we were talking about earlier this morning, individual directors coming under pressure to surrender their copyright without any ability to have fair compensation or royalties. If this agreement gets terminated, we control everyone's copyright. So then it becomes very much more like the sort of model that Ulf and Lars were talking about this morning. This isn't perfect. It doesn't cover all UK productions. Not every broadcaster is a signatory to it. And there's a particular area that is a concern for us, which is because the UK created a high-end television tax credit last year, we've seen a lot of big international co-productions come into the UK, And these are quite difficult to classify. Are they British works? Aren't they British works? Who actually is the producer? So these often, I think, fall through the net, and we're concerned about those. And I suppose the disadvantage for some directors might be that you are still having to assign your copyright. You're not licensing parts of it, so there's a loss of control of your individual work. It's very important for us that we present a united front in the negotiations, having a single voice. And the thing about our agreement is it means we have to try and put a value on the rights that directors are assigning. So it means we have to have very good information about what your rights really are worth. Information about what they're worth in the sales market, in DVD, and increasingly in online. And so we've had to invest a lot in economic research to provide us with that information. And that means research on new platforms and new channels as well. You probably aren't going to be able to see this very well, but this is a slide that our economist produced for us on the online TV market. So this is showing a rapid growth in online TV revenues in the UK. It's also showing us that as we move near a situation where the cloud is the dominant platform, that physical forms of download to own are probably going to reduce, but subscriptions and advertising are going to increase. I'll put this slide in so that people can have a look at it, but that's an example of the kind of level of detail we've got there.
So I should say that directors generally think short term, in the sense that we focus very much on the job that we're doing. You prep, you shoot, you edit, you do the post, it goes out. So we're very good at very focused over a sort of short-ish period of time. What traditionally we haven't been very good at is long-term thinking. This is something that we as directors all need to change. We need to change, we need to think long-term. So one of the things that we as director members, we pretty much give Andrew and his team free rein to spend whatever they like on research, pretty much. Because we've understood how valuable it is for the long term. So that's something that we are absolutely giving the mandate to our organisation to do. So, thinking long term, the future?
Yes, we're seeing some quite fundamental changes in the power structure in British TV and film. 10 or 15 years ago, the broadcasters were very dominant, and production companies didn't have a great deal of power. That situation is reversed now, and the broadcasters are under pressure, particularly the BBC, which is having to cope with reduced funding and a reduction in its services. And the independent production companies are very powerful. The 5 largest ones in the UK are more powerful than the broadcasters. So we're looking at an environment where we might have to be dealing with hundreds of production companies transacting rights with individual directors. And that is a concern for us, because that's when a director is most vulnerable. So we're looking to the future at adopting a more strict extended collective licensing environment, even to the point of triggering that assignment by individual directors of their copyright to Directors UK. Because only if the copyrights are housed within our organisation can we be sure that we can protect individual directors' rights when they're dealing with production companies. Now, we're thinking about this at the moment. This is something we're trying to understand. In that sort of environment, you can then talk about licensing uses rather than surrendering the entire copyright. So there's a possibility of greater control. And for us, it would mean that we can then cover all works. It wouldn't just be limited to the broadcasters we currently sign up for. The downside, of course, is that there will be a higher cost of collection and a higher cost of enforcement, and we will have to take that on board. And it does mean that directors will still have to surrender their copyright, this time to Directors UK rather than the production company. But these are complex things which we're going to have to debate and understand, and I suspect many of you are in the same position. But the thing about it, to bring us back to where we started, is I can't imagine us being able to have this conversation if we didn't have the professional association and the collecting society in one organisation. Without that, I don't know how we would tackle this. So, thank you for listening.
The first thing I would like to ask, if you're thinking about asking your questions, you are collecting. You're just talking about TV, or you're talking about film? What's
In the UK, it's TV. Yeah.
So what are you going to do about, or what are you doing about the film?
Well, the approach we're adopting in film is a more conventional industrial relations type of conversation. That's more about getting directors able to be paid royalties directly by production companies rather than a collective solution.
Okay.
It's quite difficult because the British film industry is closely connected with the US film industry. It's more difficult to have these collective solutions. You guys know what I'm talking about here. So our focus is a bit more on getting a better contractual environment for directors.
Okay, Ulf, then Pauline.
Thinking your allies, you say that you have discussions with other freelance groups. How are your discussions with the neighboring rights, with the actors and the script writers that is near you? Do you have a discussion of cooperation for the future?
Yes, we do. That is a deeper level of cooperation than it used to be. We have several areas where we're producing a common position. One of them is on the future of the BBC, which is being debated at the moment. But the other is on more general things connected with freelancers. You know, there's stuff to do with how the tax system in the UK unfairly treats freelancers. There are things about how freelancers have to suffer from prolonged periods of unemployment, effectively, that are common across it. So there are a number of areas where we're trying to build those alliances.
But not when it comes to rights.
No, that's a good point, actually. There are certain similarities, but I think the road we've gone down is so different from everybody else's. And in fact, I think we feel that by pursuing something very specific for us, we're in a better position than having to go along with a different way of doing it that everybody does. And that's our political choice that we've made.
I was wondering if you have in your TV rights agreements, if you do include catch-up TV already, or is it part of those online uses that you will target in the future?
It's a factor in deciding what figure we want to put on the value of the rights that a director's transacting. So 10 years ago, that would have been mostly made up of foreign sales and DVD revenues. But now our calculation definitely includes catch-up services, online, streaming. We incorporate all that in. If we get to a position where there is a remuneration right for online uses separately identified and that is collectible by the collecting society, then we would extract it out of the UK rights agreement and have it separately identified so we can collect it. But for the moment, because we haven't got any other choice, we lump it in with the total.
Björn?
Yes, I can see the system is quite different from the Nordic countries, for example. Just briefly, we have a union, and as I said, we control the copyrights. And for the national retransmission rights, we have a collecting society who have agreements with the cable operators. Of course, you are telling about that you have agreements nationally with the broadcasters, which is a major difference. And we also now see that there's a change of powers in the national market, also in Norway, but still we have this construction. The question is, first of all, what about international retransmission? If the broadcaster gets all the rights, do they get all the rights nationally or also all retransmission rights? And what about VOD and the challenges towards the private copy part of it. Because I think we see that in the future, VOD will not maybe only replace direct TV, but also private copy.
Well, we have a technical provision in our UK rights agreement that means we reserve the right to receive statutory and levies like cable retransmission and private copying. So that is protected. As I said earlier, our approach at the moment is to try and put a value on VOD and add it to the total valuation we have for the rights. So we don't separate it out. We include it in our list of how to work out what your rights are worth.
So, can you move the...
They are very, very... It's a very good job, especially the last one for the future. That when the lady Delith said that we are focused on the work of the film and we don't care, or maybe we forget the future. The point is that our experience in Italy of the others is that when we make a proposal that contains advantages for all the system, generally producer, they shivers. Let's say that they get irritated. So the question is, what if you asked this proposal, if you offered this proposal to the PACT in UK, especially to the chairman, John McVeigh, and what was their reaction? Thank you.
Well, he hasn't seen it yet, so don't say anything. I'm revealing it to you because I think it's important we all talk about this. These are conversations we should have. I don't think he will like it at all. They like to be able to say, here's your contract, sign there, take it or leave it. That's what's going on. And if we don't protect individual directors, they are individually really vulnerable. Our lawyers' caseload every week is about directors who've been fired, no contract, not paid. They've had their copyright taken away from them. It's their own show that they created. They brought it to a company and the company's taken it away from them. So that is what you're up against, really. And I have to think about a future where am I worried that individual directors are on their own fighting to protect their rights with powerful production companies? That's why we're thinking about how we can surround them with the protection of a collective society that they own.
I have an idea. Once, when he came in Rome, he said, I'm a destroyer of a system because I was punk when I was young. So we could be punk when we will negotiate it with them.
Okay,
Cecile?
Can I just quickly add to that? By the nature of what we do, directors are quite isolated, and we don't get to meet very many other directors. So it's another reason why this particular model works particularly well in the UK, because if nothing else, we're actually all coming together and we are speaking to each other about what's happening. And already in the last probably year and a half, we're seeing quite a big change. People are phoning our lawyer. People are sending things in. People are complaining in a way that hasn't really happened before. So we're really seeing a shift. It's not great, it's happening, obviously, but at least we're doing something about it.
Cecile?
I have a question on private copying. So you said that a judicial review has been launched at the initiative of UK Music Organisation. Are you also discussing the possibility of a complaint to the European Commission as the Spanish rights holders did 2 years ago?
Not at the moment, Cecile, no. The strategy is to try and take this through the UK process first. It's not been ruled out as far as I know, but that's where we're just doing this at the moment.
Okay, Maurizio?
How much does it cost your structure as CMO? And what's the fee, that you have from the rights? If you, we are talking about the revenues, but are you a part of the negotiation on the investment of the broadcaster and how do you manage it?
In terms of fees, because I pay them, I thought I'd answer. We pay 10% plus tax plus VAT to the management organisation for the UK money, and we pay 15% on foreign levies. And I have an agent, so they get a cut as well, sadly, but there you go. In terms of being present at the investment of the... Do you mean, are we present as directors at the whole rights talks? Is that what you mean?
I know that you have some agreement with the broadcaster for the investment that they have to do. Is that right? I mean, I know that Sky is making an agreement with the producer and the authors in UK. How much do they have to invest in local products? Is that right? And are you part of this?
No.
I just wanted to go back to the stage directors. Maybe it's not quite the theme, but what is their status? Because here in Slovenia, their rights are neighboring rights. They are not copyright. So, because you said you are in ally with stage directors.
What's the status of stage directors, did you say? Worse. I mean, audiovisual directors in the UK are joint authors of a work with the production company, but stage directors don't have any copyright in their productions, so the only thing they have is their salary, and those salaries are very, very low, and the most powerful stage directors can sometimes negotiate a royalty on box office receipts. The one thing that's really popular in the UK now, I don't know whether it's the same for you, is relays or retransmissions of theatre productions into cinemas. Yeah. This is a massive thing now. And that, of course, has the potential to create a different revenue stream. And the National Theatre, which is our biggest public theatre, does pay royalties to theatre directors for retransmissions. So we're quite interested in the development of Stage Directors UK, which Delith was talking about, because there is a possibility to collect royalties for them rather like we do for audiovisual.
How is your relation to agents? Because when I speak to the actors anyway, Becks, the agents are represented in Becks and things like that. Do you have the same problem?
Yeah, I have an agent. Agents. Do we all love our agents? Actually, I do love mine. She's great. Agents are interesting. We do have a good relationship with Directors UK with agents. We've worked quite hard at building up that relationship, and it's getting even better.
I was thinking about the copy. Do they in any way get money for the copyright too, or do they just go to take percent of the salaries?
Well, it's a choice of a member whether they give the agent a share of what we collect. So we leave it to the member to say.
We try to keep that away.
Yeah, no, generally we have to pay our agents as well. It's quite unusual that you get out of that, but.
Okay, so we have to wrap it up now because the food is getting cold.